Okay, Saturday, the 3rd of February 2024. So, conscription. So there's been a lot of talk recently in the UK about conscription in terms of Russia and fighting for government, for country, whoever else. And that's all fine, interesting, and a lot of people are saying that they wouldn't fight. Fair enough. They have their own reasons, their own thoughts, their own priorities and values. That's fine. What I want to discuss and talk about, by follow the logic and raising the stakes, a lot of people are saying they wouldn't fight for this government, they wouldn't fight for this country. Because then that unravels and reveals another interesting concept. What kind of society would you fight for? What kind of country or peoples or culture would you fight for? That's a question worth asking yourself. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, I'll fight for my family. Every Englishman's home is a castle. Every Englishman's house is his castle, by all means. But understand that we are not islands. We need other people in life for food, for electricity, for internet, for other things. A house can't truly be off-grid. In one way it could be, in the middle of a forest, isolated and all the rest. But it's still going to be, the vast majority of people are still going to be dependent on society to provide water, electricity, internet, you name it. Food. Someone's got to grow the food. Fair enough. So then it begs the question, what kind of society would you fight for? Now, when I say society, I don't just mean the people and culture, not just the spontaneous order of how people behave or how people think, but everything, the whole encompassing notion of society. The way people act, the way they behave, the infrastructure, the countryside, the nature, your geolocation, how the postal system, your complete way of life as a complete package. What kind of society would you fight for? Fair enough. And that itself is an interesting question, because there's two interesting questions that I tend to ask myself when it comes to where to live in the world. Two interesting metrics, there's a few others, but these are two main ones. Is what kind of society is it? As in like everything. People's attitudes towards rubbish on the street. How easy is it to get, say, a takeaway meal or a takeaway pizza at 3 o'clock in the morning? How good is the postal system? How good is the road infrastructure or railway infrastructure? Real intricate details like that. So what kind of society is it? And also, to what extent do you trust the government? A lot or not a lot? To what extent? Because it's worth thinking about. If you won't fight for country A and government A, then what about country B and government B? Or even country B and government B? Or government C? Country B and government C? Or country B and government A? Or what about country A and government B? For example, different combinations. Which ones would you fight for? Which government would you trust? This one? That one? So those are two things I look at when thinking about where to live. The society, what kind of society is it, the granular level, and to what extent do you trust the government? Now there's ways of mitigating both. There's nuances and lifestyle decisions and actions and insulation, different ways of protecting yourself and hedging against these risks, for example, third-party risks. But given the scenario recently in the UK, a lot of people are saying they wouldn't fight for the government or the country, then it's worth asking what kind of society, what kind of country would you fight for, in a sense of to preserve it, to fight and die, the ultimate cost. Yeah, the ultimate cost, the ultimate price. I'm not sure what happened just then, just stop recording. Interesting. Because there's this channel, used to be on YouTube, he's on other platforms now, that I used to watch a lot. And about a year or something ago, or a year and a half ago, he's living in Mexico, and he talked about if the US or the CIA or whoever else invaded Mexico, he would be willing to fight for Mexico. That lifestyle, that level of freedom that he has, to preserve that level of freedom. Not so much for the government, but that society. Now, he said, because he's Western, the other country he used to come from in the Western world, he would not fight for it. And I'm quite confident he's gotten rid of his passport for that country, renounced it. Fair enough. But he did say he would fight for Mexico. Because in the same context he was contemplating around that time, I don't know about now, of getting the passport, the citizenship for said country, for Mexico. Now again, I don't know if he has today, because I'm talking like 1 or 2 years ago, but that was interesting. He said he would fight for this other country, but not for the one he came from. And when this whole discussion came up about conscription, that comment he made 1 or 2 years ago came to mind, and then also at the same time, me thinking, as always, what kind of society would you live in, and to what extent do you trust the government? Those three things all came together to say, what kind of society would you fight for? What kind of society would you die for? Interesting question. And right now I have no answer for it. Just an interesting thought. And with the whole conscription thing in the UK, it's probably a trial balloon, in a sense of release that idea, release it into the mainstream. Apparently it was everywhere for 2 days, all over the headlines. I got no idea. And what it is, I imagine it's a trial balloon, so testing how people respond and react to it, and then probably embed it into society, and in the future come back to it and normalise it, come back to that and start to make it policy. Because there's a thing in politics, like in most industries, a thing called the Overton window. The Overton window, where only a small few things are acceptable in the mainstream, every other idea or concept is fringe or unusual or not really accepted or extreme. So by shifting the Overton window, what used to be common, like law, not common, like common sense or normal, usual, mainstream, would over time become unusual or extreme. It's left here, and the Overton window, what's acceptable politically and socially, is changing. You could move that Overton window or expand the Overton window. So it could be a trial balloon where floating the idea out there, so that way to expand the Overton window, to expand it to include conscription, to include military service for everyone, and then in the future making it more normal and actually putting it into practice, into policy. That's one idea I have, but that's neither here nor there because we're talking of the future. Okay, but interesting thought though. What kind of society would you fight for? What kind of society do you want to live in? To the granular level, the culture, the attitudes, the priorities, the infrastructure. And to what extent do you trust the government? Interesting ideas, interesting, just worth thinking about. Follow the logic and raise the stakes. Follow the logic, raise the stakes. Important stuff. But otherwise, you will see me tomorrow.